You know that feeling when the door finally shuts and your whole body exhales? The click of the lock, the cold tile under your feet, the low hum of the fridge. You flip your phone face down like it's a noisy insect. Then you turn on one warm lamp and the house feels inhabited. And somewhere out there, someone still asks, "Aren't you bored?" No, not bored, just home. Here's the kicker. Loneliness isn't the same thing as solitude. A 2025 review in OBM Neurobiology describes loneliness as that aching sense of being alone and unimportant, something you can feel even in a crowded room. Solitude is being alone by choice. So if you never get bored alone, it's not a flaw. It's a system that already has something playing inside it, and you're allowed to feel relieved when the door shuts. If that scene felt familiar, if your nervous system softened the second the door closed, there's a reason you've spent years getting misunderstood. Because most people only have one story for being alone. They hear quiet and they translate it as sad, or weird, or the one that stings the most, antisocial. But you already know the difference we just named. There's an alone that hurts and an alone that heals. Now here's where it gets sharper. A 2022 paper in PLOS ONE splits solitude into two different engines, two different inner motives that can look identical from the outside. One is preference for solitude, the simple, surface level, I'd rather be alone than with people. The other is self-determined motivation for solitude. I'm alone because it gives me something back, because it restores you, because it lowers the demands, because your mind comes back online. Same outward behavior. Completely different meaning. And that difference matters because it changes the shame. If your solitude is self-determined, it's not a retreat from life. It's a return to your own operating system, which is why people keep asking you the wrong question. They see the quiet and assume it's a void. But for someone self-sufficient, quiet can be a room, not a punishment. A place with furniture, with light, with something already playing inside it. And here's the twist most people never expect. In that same PLOS ONE work, introversion didn't neatly predict who prefers solitude or who feels drawn to it. The stronger predictor of choosing solitude in a healthy, self-led way was something else. Dispositional autonomy, the tendency to live from the inside out. Not cold, not detached, just self-led. So when you never get bored alone, we're not going to treat it like a symptom. We're going to name it, reframe it, and gently let it stop being something you have to defend. You're allowed to be quiet without turning it into a personality flaw. And that's the part no one tells you. Sometimes you're not difficult. Sometimes you're just living inside rooms that were designed for a different operating system. Picture the meeting room. Not the dramatic kind, the regular kind. Beige walls, a long table, a screen glowing in the corner, the metallic hum of fluorescent lights like a tiny engine in your skull. People talk fast. They talk to think. They talk to prove they're here. You speak less not because you have nothing, but because you're running a different process. Listening, mapping, deciding what's real. And then comes the label. Quiet equals disengaged. Quiet equals not a team player. Meanwhile, you're doing something the room doesn't reward. You're trying to make your words count. Research in Frontiers in Psychology notes what many people feel in their bones. In Western cultural settings, extroversion tends to be treated as socially preferable, more desirable. And when that's the cultural weather, silence starts looking like a personal problem. That's the reframe. You're not failing the room. The room is built for a different operating system. So you learn little tricks. You nod at the right moments. You drop one sentence early so nobody panics. You add an extra emoji in a message so you don't sound cold. Not because you're fake. Because you're trying to survive a world that rewards volume without losing your own wiring. Here's the paradox that makes people ask you the wrong question. They think loneliness is the same as being alone. So they prescribe crowds. They invite you to the party. It's loud in that soft way. Loud things are music at the edge of too much, laughter spiking in unpredictable bursts, glasses clinking like tiny alarms. You smile. You laugh at the right moments. You hold your drink like a prop that says, I'm participating. You do everything correctly. And then maybe even in the middle of the room you feel it, that heavy, private thing, not silence, not emptiness, more like invisibility. Like you're present but not important. Like you're standing in a crowd and still somehow not held by it. That's why crowds don't cure it. Because what hurts isn't physical aloneness, it's disconnection. It's being surrounded and still feeling unclaimed. So when people tell you, just get out more, it can feel like being handed the wrong medicine. And when you go home and feel your shoulders drop the second the door shuts, that isn't evidence that something is wrong with you. It's evidence that your body recognizes the difference between noise and connection. Now for the shame pocket, the one that hides inside the word introvert. People hear introvert and assume awkward, but psychology confirms what you already feel. Introverts don't lack skill, they lack bandwidth. A lot of self-sufficient people are actually excellent socially, especially in environments that match their wiring. One-on-one, you're sharp, you're warm. You remember details. You can hold a conversation like a thread, not a competition. You can sit across from someone, hear what they're not saying, and respond with the kind of attention that makes people feel safe. But then comes the group setting that feels like standing under a speaker. The happy hour, the networking event, the crowded dinner where conversations overlap and collide like traffic. And after a while, your brain starts doing triage. Not because you don't care, because it's too much input at once. So if you've ever been told you're great one-on-one but you disappear in groups, you're not broken. You're selective. You're calibrated. You're built for depth, not volume. The reframe lands here. You weren't rejecting people. You were protecting bandwidth. So when someone calls you self-sufficient, it's tempting to hear it as an accusation. Too independent, too detached, too hard to reach. But the quieter truth is simpler and kinder. Often, what looks like distance is actually self-led regulation. Not, I don't need anyone. More like, I can come back to myself. And you didn't become like this because you're wrong. You adapted to a world that rewards noise. Next, we'll put the right names under this not to turn you into a diagnosis, but to give you something better than labels. So you don't have to invent reasons for your own nervous system. So you can stop defending the part of you that goes quiet and start understanding what it's doing for you. And when your hand finds the key when the door closes and the sound drops away, the silence won't feel like a question. It'll feel like home. So now we're inside the house, not the noisy world outside it, the calendars, the rooms, the small performances, inside. The rain taps the glass in a slow, patient rhythm. One warm lamp pools light onto the corner of your desk. The fridge keeps its low hum like a heartbeat. A pen clicks once, then stops. And this is the part people keep misreading as nothing, because they can't see what's running in the background. There's a word for the kind of self-sufficiency that isn't cold. It's not, I don't need anyone. It's not, I'm above people. It's simply this: autonomy, the ability to be guided from the inside out. In the research language, it's called dispositional autonomy. In human language, it means your system doesn't require a crowd to feel real. You can be alone and still feel anchored. You can be quiet and still feel inhabited. That's why self-sufficient gets you misjudged, because people confuse autonomy with detachment. But autonomy isn't distance. Autonomy is direction. Not cold, just self-led. And when you're self-led, solitude stops being a punishment and starts being a place where your mind can come back online, where you can hear your own thoughts in full sentences again without competing with the world for airtime. You're allowed to let your shoulders drop as you hear a new name for yourself. Here's a twist that frees a lot of people. You don't need to fit some perfect stereotype of an introvert to earn the right to quiet. Because in this line of work, introversion doesn't neatly predict who prefers solitude or who feels drawn to it. That might sound strange at first, because the internet loves clean labels. But human systems aren't clean. You can be socially capable and still crave silence. You can be warm and still run out of bandwidth. You can enjoy people and still need a room with the door closed to feel like yourself again. So if you've ever thought, Maybe I'm not a real introvert because I can be social. You can let that go. Your need for quiet doesn't have to prove itself. It just has to be true. Here's how it shows up in real life. Two people can do the exact same thing, say no to plans, choose a quiet night, spend Saturday alone, and from the outside, it looks identical. But on the inside, it can be two completely different climates. For one person, being alone feels like a bruise they keep pressing. They don't choose the quiet, it chooses them. And the quiet doesn't restore them. It sharpens everything. For the other person, being alone feels like maintenance. Like finally closing 20 browser tabs in the brain. Like turning down a dial that's been stuck on too much. The same silence, but this time it gives something back. That's why never gets bored is such a tell. Because boredom isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of engagement. When your solitude is the restorative kind, your mind doesn't go empty. It reorganizes. It makes sense of things. It runs its private errands. And you can watch it happen in a moment so small it almost feels embarrassing to explain. A friend texts, "Come out tonight." You stare at the message longer than you should not because you don't love them. Because you can feel the cost. Because your body is already negotiating the noise. Overlapping voices, the performance of being on, the little spikes of input you'd have to metabolize. So you type the polite thing, you add the softener, you add the smiley face so you don't sound cold, and you cancel. Not because you hate people, because you're choosing regulation over performance. Because you know exactly what the quiet will do for you when you get home. If you feel a little seen right now, you're allowed to stop bracing. And this is where the world forces a false choice on you. Either you're engaged or you're checked out. Either you're social or you're isolated. But psychology doesn't actually work like that. Engagement and disengagement are two different processes. They can exist in the same person, sometimes in the same day, sometimes in the same hour. You can be deeply engaged at work, focused, present, reliable, then need to disengage afterward, not because you're avoidant, but because your system has been running hot. Think of it like a house with a circuit breaker. When too many rooms are drawing power at once, lights, music, voices, expectations, something in you flips to protect the wiring. That flip isn't laziness. It isn't rudeness. It's preservation. So, if you've ever done the deep work thing, gone into that clean, narrow tunnel of focus, and then afterward felt like you couldn't speak for a while, you're not antisocial. You're cooling down. You're letting the system return to baseline. And in that quiet, your mind doesn't go blank. It keeps moving just privately. The rain keeps tapping. The lamp stays on. The hum stays steady. Let's name the whole pattern in one breath. The behavior. You spend time alone. You don't get bored. You cancel plans. You go quiet. The label people stick on it. Weird. Antisocial. Avoidant. Cold. The truth underneath. Autonomy. Self-led regulation. Self-determined solitude. Healthy disengagement when the load is too high. The conclusion. It's not a flaw. It's a function. You're not hard to entertain. You're self-powered. You're allowed to be quiet without turning it into a personality flaw. So, let's stop proving it. Let's stop building a case. Because you've carried enough arguments in your body, and maybe that's the quiet miracle of closing a door. The world stops asking questions. The click isn't dramatic. It's small. But your shoulders understand it better than language. The air changes. The sound drops. The room doesn't demand anything from your face. One warm lamp turns on. Light gathers softly on the floor like it has nowhere else to be. The rain is there distant, steady tapping the window as if the night is breathing for you. You feel the fabric of a blanket against your forearm. The cold tile becomes less important as your body finds something warmer. The fridge keeps its low hum, not noise, not interruption. Just proof that the house is alive. And for a moment, you don't have to translate yourself. You don't have to justify why quiet feels good. You don't have to apologize for the fact that your mind doesn't go empty when the room goes silent. You're not on trial. You're home. Here's the permission you rarely get, because the world is suspicious of stillness. You're allowed to choose solitude as freedom from demands. Not as rejection. Not as avoidance. As restoration. Not a hack, not a productivity trick, not a personality statement. Just maintenance. There's research that lines up with what your body has been telling you for years. Solitude can support reflection, quiet concentration, writing, even that slow kind of thinking that doesn't happen under pressure. It can feel reinvigorating not because you're escaping life, but because you're finally giving your system a chance to settle. And for some people, changing what being alone means softening the story around it can even ease the sharp edge of loneliness. That's not advice. That's not a command. It's simply a gentler interpretation of what you already experience. Sometimes the quiet is not a void. Sometimes it's where you come back online. Because you're allowed to rest, not because you're weak, because you're maintaining the system. And yes, this matters too. Spending time with others can be valuable and needed. Real connection can be medicine. But it has to be the kind of connection that doesn't cost your nervous system as an entrance fee. So if you've spent years trying to fix your quiet, you're allowed to let that project go. Now let's leave you with something simple. Not a lesson. A truth you can carry like a key. Not lonely. Not broken. Not empty. Complete. Engaged. Quiet on purpose. Because the truth is, your inner world doesn't go dark when the world goes quiet. It lights up. And when you finally stop fighting that, life gets softer around the edges. The rain keeps tapping. The lamp stays on. The house stays inhabited. If silence feels like medicine to you, you're allowed to take it. And if this video put words to something you've been living, if it made you feel a little more understood, there's a small, gentle way to tell the system that this kind of quiet belongs on your feed. Subscribe to Psyche Shelter. Not as a promise you have to keep up with, just as a way to keep the door here easy to find. And if you feel up to it, leave one comment, one line is enough. Where do you feel most at home in your own mind? A room, a time of day, a sound, a ritual. No pressure to be eloquent, no pressure to be cheerful. Even a few words counts. We'll keep the light on.